Ghouls in the Fallout universe trace their origins to the cataclysmic events of the 23rd of October 2077, the day the Great War annihilated civilization with nuclear fire and blanketed the world in intense radiation. But while radiation is the most obvious culprit, the truth is more complex, involving not just nuclear fallout, but also the forced evolutionary virus, FEV, and the peculiar conditions of certain environments, which together created a situation where some humans survived the initial devastation, but were forever altered in the process. Ghouls are humans whose cells have undergone a form of necrotic mutation, granting them vastly increased longevity and resistance to radiation, but at the cost of their physical appearance, with skin sloughing away, hair falling out, and their bodies taking on the iconic desiccated look that defines them. And while countless humans simply perished from radiation poisoning, a rare number adapted to it, sometimes because of pre-existing genetic markers, sometimes because of exposure to FEV traces released from laboratories like West and Mariposa, and sometimes due to specific conditions like prolonged exposure in irradiated vaults, most famously Vault 12 inches Bakersfield, which failed to seal properly and allowed radiation to pour in, turning its inhabitants into what became the first known stable population of ghouls in the post-war world. This is why not every survivor became a ghoul, as the transformation required a precise combination of radiation levels, genetic susceptibility, and in some cases, environmental FEV contamination, and even in the pre-war years, hints of this possibility existed, with West Tech's experiments on biological resilience and the military's pursuit of human adaptation to radiation, laying the groundwork for what would later unfold, though no one could have predicted the twisted outcome that became the ghoul condition. In-universe, ghouls are often misunderstood, even by wasteland scientists, with conflicting theories circulating about whether they are simply irradiated humans or something closer to a new species altogether. And part of their mystique comes from the fact that they are not a deliberate creation, unlike supermutants, but rather an accidental byproduct of humanity's self-destruction, a grim symbol of survival in a world where survival itself is often a curse, and their first appearances in Fallout history are tied directly to Necropolis, the settlement of former Vault 12 residents. But ghouls were not confined to that location alone, as isolated cases emerged in other irradiated regions as well, sometimes slowly, as survivors exposed to lingering fallout transformed years after the bombs fell, and sometimes immediately, when unlucky souls endured lethal doses, only to awaken days later as the shambling but conscious necrotic beings that would come to populate the wastes. This phenomenon terrified early post-war humans, who often reacted with violence, branding ghouls as monsters and driving them away, which is why so many early ghoul communities formed in isolation or underground. And this early history set the stage for the centuries of tension between ghouls and smoothskins that continues throughout the Fallout timeline, making the origin of ghouls not just a tale of biological mutation, but also the beginning of a social divide that would shape the politics, cultures, and survival strategies of the wasteland for over 200 years. And as such, the birth of ghouls is inseparable from the very moment Fallout's world was reborn in nuclear fire. When examining the story of ghouls in Fallout, the tale of Necropolis is central, because this ruined city in the remains of Bakersfield, California, is considered the birthplace of the first true ghoul community, a grim monument to both human suffering and adaptation in the aftermath of the Great War, and its existence is directly tied to the experiment of Vault 12, one of Vault-Tech's many sinister facilities scattered across the United States, each designed with hidden, often cruel, purposes masked under the guise of protecting humanity. For while most vaults were intended to study human behavior under extreme conditions or test social and scientific theories, Vault 12 was specifically designed to fail in one critical aspect. Its door was constructed so that it would not fully seal when the bombs fell, meaning radiation would slowly but steadily leak into the vault, bathing its inhabitants in lethal levels of fallout over a prolonged period. And this experiment was not simply negligence, but a deliberate Vault-Tech directive, with the objective of observing what would happen to humans subjected to long-term controlled exposure to radiation, and the results were horrifying but also groundbreaking in Fallout's universe, because instead of dying en masse, many of the Vault's residents underwent the ghoul transformation, their cells altered by radiation in ways that preserved life but stripped away humanity's traditional form, producing what we now know as ghouls, a twisted blend of survival and mutation. And while thousands across the globe perished in nuclear fire, the people of Vault 12 endured, but endured as something different. Their new existence, marked by necrotic skin, sunken eyes, and a lifespan stretching into centuries. When they eventually left the vault, these ghouls emerged into the shattered world above and claimed the ruins of Bakersfield as their own, creating the settlement later known as Necropolis, a place that would become infamous among wastelanders for its eerie, quiet, crumbling infrastructure and its population of irradiated survivors who clung to the remnants of their lives in the shadows of a dead city. And within this settlement, a hierarchy quickly formed, for leadership fell into the hands of Set, a ghoul whose cunning and ruthless pragmatism ensured his dominance, yet whose leadership style also reflected the darker side of ghoul survival, because while he sought to protect his people, he also ruled with fear and demanded absolute loyalty, creating an environment of paranoia and suspicion where the already shunned ghoul population turned against one another in the name of survival. Set's rule would make him one of the most memorable ghoul leaders in Fallout's history, his interactions with outsiders shaping much of the Vault Dwellers' experience in Fallout 1, where Necropolis is discovered as a major location tied to the main quest. But long before the Vault Dweller entered the picture, Necropolis had already developed as a unique society, one that reveals the early struggles of ghouls as they attempted to reconcile their new identity with the decaying remains of the human world. For unlike humans who rebuilt towns like Shady Sands or Junktown, the ghouls of Necropolis were defined not by growth or innovation, but by their desperate attempts to simply exist in peace, rejected by the wider wasteland and forced into self-imposed exile, and their settlement reflected this tension, with underground tunnels and vault chambers serving as their true homes, while the surface ruins were left to scavengers, raiders, and the encroaching dangers of the wasteland, making Necropolis a place both feared and pitied by those who encountered it. What makes the tale of Necropolis particularly important is how it illustrates the duality of ghoul life. On one hand, the ghouls are victims of Vault-Tech's cruelty and the post-war world's hostility, while on the other, they become antagonists themselves, under Set's rule, often meeting outsiders with aggression, suspicion, or outright violence. And this complexity made Fallout storytelling stand out, even from the very beginning, because Necropolis was not a simple monster town, but rather a nuanced community grappling with its condition, with individuals like Set embodying the harshness of survival, while others remained more open, revealing glimpses of the humanity still left inside ghouls despite their outward appearance. The presence of the city's water pump and its reliance on outside aid also played into Fallout's broader themes of scarcity and resource dependency, for Necropolis had few sustainable means of survival, and the ghouls' access to clean water became a central plot point in Fallout 1, where the Vault Dweller can either help repair their pump, ensuring the community's survival, or ignore their plight, leading to their eventual downfall, demonstrating how fragile ghoul settlements were in a wasteland that barely tolerated them. The story of Necropolis also carries with it the sense of tragedy that defines so much of ghoul history, because while the ghouls of Vault 12 survived where countless others perished, their survival came at such a terrible cost that they were never again accepted as fully human, their very existence serving as a reminder of the horrors of the Great War and the twisted experiments of Vault-Tec. And in this way, Necropolis is not just a location but a symbol of Fallout's entire worldview, where survival is never clean or triumphant, but instead warped, compromised, and tragic. And though Set's authoritarian rule left a mark on how outsiders viewed the settlement, Necropolis remains a milestone in Fallout lore, the first recorded ghoul society, and the foundation for every ghoul story that followed. A place where mutated survivors carved out a life among ruins, cursed by their condition yet refusing to surrender to extinction, and their endurance, though precarious, proved that ghouls were not merely an aberration, but a permanent part of the post-war world, destined to spread far beyond the ruined streets of Bakersfield, as time marched forward into the age of the wasteland. The biology of ghouls is one of the most mysterious yet fascinating aspects of Fallout lore, because their existence is both a scientific anomaly and a powerful narrative device that highlights the consequences of humanity's obsession with nuclear energy and reckless experimentation. And though Fallout never delivers a single definitive scientific explanation, enough canonical information exists across the games to paint a detailed picture of how ghouls function, how they differ from humans, and what makes them unique within the ecosystem of the post-nuclear wasteland. First and foremost, ghouls are characterized by their necrotic skin and bodies, their outward appearance resembling extreme radiation burns, with missing hair, cracked skin, sunken eyes, and skeletal features. Yet despite their apparent decay, they are not dead, nor are they undead in the traditional sense, but living beings whose cells have undergone mutations caused by prolonged exposure to radiation and, in many cases, the lingering influence of the forced evolutionary virus, a fact hinted at in Fallout lore through places like Vault 12, West-Tec, and Mariposa, where FEV was present in the environment even before the bombs fell, mixing with Fallout to create conditions that led to ghoulification. One of the most striking biological traits of ghouls is their longevity, because once transformed, ghouls effectively become immune to the standard aging process that governs humans, allowing them to live not just decades longer, but centuries. With many ghouls alive during the events of Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4 having witnessed the bombs fall firsthand on the 23rd of October 2077, and surviving over 200 years afterward, which creates characters like Carol in Underworld, who remembers her life as a child before the war, or Raul Tejada, who was already an adult in Mexico before the Great War and has endured into the Mojave era, and Harold, whose life spans multiple games and who serves as one of Fallout's most enduring symbols of the ghoul condition. proving that their cells do not degrade with time in the way that human cells do, but rather remain in a stasis of mutation, where the body neither heals completely nor deteriorates beyond function. Linked to this is the ghoul's unique relationship with radiation, because while radiation is lethal to humans, causing cell death, cancers, and mutations that almost always result in death, ghouls are not only immune, but in fact healed by radiation exposure, their bodies absorbing and metabolizing it in a way that restores their health, closing wounds, rejuvenating strength, and in some cases even maintaining their mental clarity, which is why ghouls often seek out irradiated environments as safe havens, places where humans cannot tread, turning bombed ruins, abandoned reactors, and glowing craters into homes where they can thrive. And this connection to radiation also means that in combat, ghouls exposed to intense levels of radiation can manifest as glowing ones, feral ghouls that emit dangerous amounts of radiation, and can even heal nearby ghouls in their presence, suggesting that the mutation allows them to channel ambient radiation into active biological energy, a frightening ability that makes them dangerous, not only because of their feral aggression, but also because they can strengthen their allies in battle. However, the most tragic element of ghoul biology is the phenomenon of feralization, the process by which an otherwise stable and intelligent ghoul gradually loses their mental faculties, descending into animalistic behavior until they are indistinguishable from rabid predators, attacking humans and even fellow ghouls without reason. And while the exact cause of feralization remains debated in universe, theories suggest it is the cumulative effect of radiation damage over centuries, neurological decay that no amount of mutation can prevent, or psychological trauma manifesting in physical breakdown, and the fact that no ghoul, no matter how stable, is entirely safe from this fate creates a grim shadow over their lives, because every ghoul must live with the knowledge that one day they may lose themselves completely, turning on their friends, family, and communities in a mindless rampage. Ghoul physiology also grants them unique vulnerabilities and advantages in combat, as they are resistant to radiation and poisons, but still suffer from physical injuries like bullets or blunt trauma, and their necrotic skin, while grotesque, does not necessarily make them weak, as many ghouls are physically resilient and capable of surviving in harsh conditions without the food, water, and rest that humans require, leading to speculation that their mutation altered not just the surface of their bodies, but their internal organs as well, creating systems that can function indefinitely under minimal maintenance. And this endurance is what allows them to wander the wasteland for centuries, scavenging, exploring, and remembering eras long forgotten by their human counterparts. Another question tied to ghoul biology is reproduction, because in canon, no evidence exists that ghouls can reproduce biologically, and while they retain many human traits and memories, their mutation appears to have sterilized them, meaning their population can only be sustained by the creation of new ghouls from irradiated humans rather than from generational birth, which adds to their rarity and precarious existence, because while humans can replenish themselves, ghouls are dependent on the chance conditions of radiation exposure to increase their numbers, and as the centuries pass, fewer humans are exposed to the levels of radiation necessary to cause ghoulification, meaning that the ghoul population may in fact be dwindling, replaced slowly by ferals who outnumber intelligent ghouls in almost every region of the wasteland. Despite this, ghouls display remarkable individuality in their return, personalities, and mental resilience, with some embracing their condition as liberation from human fragility. like Hancock in Fallout 4, who chooses to become a ghoul voluntarily by consuming radioactive substances to share the perspective of his people, while others live in constant despair or shame, struggling to cope with the prejudice they face from humans who view them as monsters. But no matter their outlook, their bodies remain bound to the same biological truths. They will outlive nearly everyone they meet. They will never again resemble who they once were, and they will always walk the line between sentience and ferality, never certain when or if the mutation will finally consume their minds. Overall, ghoul biology defines them as one of the most tragic yet enduring legacies of the Great War, a living testament to humanity's self-inflicted ruin, beings who exist on the edge of humanity but are not quite separate from it, gifted with immortality and resilience, but cursed with deformity and the ever-present fear of losing themselves. And in the larger world of Fallout, this biological uniqueness ensures that ghouls will always occupy a distinct and irreplaceable role, embodying the paradox of the wasteland: survival at any cost, even if the cost is everything that once made you human. Among all the aspects of ghoul existence, nothing inspires more fear and tragedy than the process of feralization, the slow but relentless decline of a once intelligent ghoul into a mindless husk that no longer remembers its past life, its friends, or even its name. And the phenomenon of feral ghouls has haunted Fallout since its earliest entries, growing more prominent in later titles as vast swarms of ferals came to populate ruined cities, dark subways, and irradiated wastelands. But despite their ubiquity, the cause of feralization remains uncertain, debated by in-universe scholars, scientists, and wastelanders alike. And this uncertainty is part of what makes them such a compelling and horrifying element of Fallout lore, because feralization is not an immediate effect of ghoulification, but a gradual deterioration of the mind that can take decades, even centuries, to manifest, leaving intelligent ghouls to live with the looming fear that one day they will simply lose themselves and awaken as a monster. In practical terms, feral ghouls are recognized by their animalistic behavior, aggressive howls, shuffling movements, and an unrelenting drive to attack any living being that crosses their path. And while some are weak and barely more dangerous than unarmed humans, others are terrifyingly strong, mutated into variants such as reavers, bloated ghouls, and the infamous glowing ones, whose irradiated bodies not only allow them to heal themselves, but also emit bursts of radiation that restore health to other nearby ferals, making them leaders of ghoul packs in a twisted mirror of organized communities. The mystery of why some ghouls go feral, while others remain lucid, is at the heart of their lore, and the games provide multiple hints without delivering a single definitive answer. In Fallout 3, characters like Gob and Carol explain that ghouls fear the possibility of going feral, with no clear trigger, while in Fallout 4, the sole survivor encounters countless intelligent ghouls who remain sane centuries after the bombs, even as others in the same era have lost all sense of self, suggesting that individual biology, radiation levels, and environmental factors all play roles. Some theories suggest that the brain tissue of ghouls, while more resilient than that of humans, is still slowly breaking down under the strain of necrosis, leading to a form of neurodegeneration that eventually strips away higher cognitive functions, leaving behind only primal instincts, while others propose that ghouls who lose access to consistent radiation may degrade more quickly, their bodies unable to sustain the delicate balance that maintains their minds, though this is contradicted by examples of ghouls who lived far from heavy radiation, yet retained clarity, showing that no single cause can be universally applied. The existence of glowing ones complicates the picture further, because while they are almost always feral, their ability to radiate energy and command groups of other ghouls suggests a form of mutation that enhances certain traits even as it strips away intellect, hinting at divergent evolutionary paths within the ghoul condition. Fallout 76 adds another layer by depicting Appalachia's early ghouls, many of whom feralized rapidly in the first decades after the war, suggesting that environmental radiation spikes or unstable post-war conditions may accelerate the process. But again, others in the same region remained sane, proving that feralization cannot be tied to time alone. What makes ferals so terrifying in Fallout's world is not just their aggression but their numbers, because in nearly every region of the wasteland, they are encountered in abandoned subways, derelict hospitals, ruined cities, and collapsed vaults, swarming in packs that overwhelm the unprepared, making them as much a natural hazard as radscorpions or deathclaws, and in some places like the Commonwealth and Capital Wasteland, their presence is so overwhelming that entire human settlements have been abandoned, unable to withstand constant attacks. Yet for all their danger, the greatest horror lies in the knowledge that every feral was once a person with memories, family, and a will to live, and this knowledge weighs heavily on intelligent ghouls, many of whom speak of loved ones who eventually turned feral, leaving them no choice but to kill them or flee. And in some of the series' most heartbreaking moments, ghouls like Raoul Tejada or Daisy share fears that they too will eventually succumb, losing their hard-won sense of self. Fallout quests frequently highlight this tragedy, such as the Tenpenny Tower storyline in Fallout 3, where Roy Phillips insists that humans must make space for ghouls, but his willingness to unleash feral hordes into the tower underscores the fine line between seeking justice and embracing destruction. Or the kid in a fridge encounter in Fallout 4, where a young ghoul named Billy remains lucid, despite centuries trapped in a refrigerator, while countless others around him in the Commonwealth have long since turned feral, creating confusion and terror in players as they realize that the distinction between sanity and madness has no predictable rule. In mechanical terms, ferals also reflect Fallout's design philosophy, acting as both narrative devices and combat encounters, populating ruins with enemies that embody the lingering scars of the Great War, their presence a constant reminder that radiation is never truly gone, that even human survivors can be reduced to bestial shadows of themselves, and that the line between life and death is blurred in Fallout's world. The feral mystery is never solved outright, which is fitting, because it maintains their horror and unpredictability, allowing each game to explore different interpretations. But the consistent theme is that feralization represents the ultimate price of ghoul immortality. The longer a ghoul lives, the greater the immortality, a chance that their memories and personality will eventually erode, until only instinct remains, making every intelligent ghoul a tragic figure, walking a tightrope between endurance and collapse. This creates one of Fallout's most effective forms of existential dread, because for ghouls, survival is not a blessing, but a gamble, where the reward for living centuries is the knowledge that the end may not come as peaceful death, but as a slow unraveling of the self. And in that sense, feral ghouls are more than just monsters to fight. They are the living embodiment of the curse of the wasteland, proof that even those who cheat death cannot escape its consequences forever. and their mystery continues to haunt Fallout's world, leaving players and characters alike to wonder when, not if, the next mind will be lost to the endless hunger of ferality. One of the most fascinating aspects of ghoul history in the Fallout universe is the way in which these mutated humans, rejected and persecuted by smoothskins, carved out their own societies and communities in the ruins of the post-war world, and examining these communities reveals not only the resilience of ghouls, but also the different ways they adapt to their condition, with some seeking isolation, some striving for coexistence with humans, and others embracing vengeance against the society that cast them out. The earliest and most famous being Necropolis, the settlement that arose from Vault 12, when its malfunctioning door allowed radiation to flood in and transform the residents into ghouls, who then claimed the ruins of Bakersfield as their home, and though they were initially bound together by their shared suffering, Necropolis became a symbol of ghoul resilience and tragedy. As by the time of the first Fallout, its people were struggling with dwindling resources, internal divisions, and the looming threat of extermination by supermutants and humans alike, showing how ghoul communities were forced to constantly defend not only their survival, but their right to exist. Beyond Necropolis, other groups formed in various parts of the wasteland, such as the Underworld in the capital Wasteland, a society of ghouls who took shelter in the Museum of History and transformed it into a thriving settlement that rejected the surface world's hatred and offered sanctuary to their own kind, a place where ghouls could celebrate their identity without fear of violence. And here, characters like Carol, Greta, and Winthrop demonstrate the way ghouls built culture, trade, and even religion around their shared experience, making Underworld not just a refuge, but a defiant statement that ghouls were more than monsters, though even this bastion was not free of fear, as the threat of feralization loomed over every resident, a reminder that their society's greatest danger might come from within. In the Mojave, the RepCon test site became the center of a community led by Jason Bright, a glowing ghoul who preached a religious doctrine that fused apocalyptic spirituality with the dream of space travel, gathering followers who longed for transcendence beyond the wasteland. And while outsiders saw them as fanatics, their unity and hope demonstrated another way that ghouls could build meaning out of their condition, not by hiding or fighting, but by reaching toward something greater, however misguided it might seem. In Fallout 4's Commonwealth, the picture is more fragmented, with ghouls scattered among human settlements, some attempting to live alongside smoothskins in places like Goodneighbor, where Hancock, himself a ghoul mayor, turned the neighborhood into a safe haven for outcasts of all kinds, creating perhaps the most inclusive post-war community in the franchise, one where humans, ghouls, and other misfits coexisted under a rough code of freedom and tolerance, proving that integration was possible under the right leadership, though even Hancock's authority could not erase the prejudices that lingered in the wider world, as traveling ghouls were still harassed or hunted when beyond Goodneighbor's walls. Beyond these major settlements, smaller and more tragic ghoul communities also appear across the series, such as the irradiated inhabitants of Vault 81's secret wing, or the long-suffering ferals lurking in collapsed vaults, remnants of societies that never survived their transformations, and these stand as grim contrasts to thriving ghoul towns, reminders that for every underworld or Goodneighbor, there are countless failed communities lost to feralization, starvation, or human aggression. What binds all ghoul societies together, however, is the unshakable knowledge that they are outsiders in the human world, and that their only chance of stability comes either through isolation, self-reliance, or forging alliances with sympathetic humans. And this struggle for place is perhaps the deepest tragedy of their existence. Because while ghouls are physically capable of surviving centuries, even millennia, the societies they build are fragile, constantly endangered by human hostility, mutant incursions, resource scarcity, and the ever-present specter of feralization, making each ghoul community a fragile experiment in survival. Yet their persistence across Fallout's many settings reveals something vital about them. Ghouls, though twisted by radiation and rejected by most, retain the most human of all instincts, the drive to come together, to share burdens, to build homes, and to create meaning in a world that denies them dignity. And through communities like Necropolis, Underworld, Goodneighbor, and the Bright Brotherhood, Fallout shows that ghouls are not merely wanderers or monsters, but builders of culture and history. Their settlements scattered but significant, each one a testament to the enduring will of beings who have already outlived the world that made them. Necropolis stands as one of the most iconic locations in Fallout history, not only because it was the first true ghoul settlement encountered by the Vault Dweller, but because it represents the earliest example of a functioning post-war society composed entirely of ghouls, a city built from the ruins of Bakersfield, California, after the catastrophic failure of Vault 12, whose malfunctioning door allowed deadly radiation to pour in during the Great War, transforming its inhabitants into the first long-lived ghouls, and forcing them to adapt to a new reality where survival meant both resilience and ruthlessness. And when the Vault Dweller arrives in Fallout 1, Necropolis is depicted as a crumbling, eerie metropolis, its buildings partially collapsed, streets littered with debris, and its residents cautious, suspicious, and often hostile toward outsiders, reflecting centuries of isolation and persecution, because the ghouls are not only dealing with their physical transformation, but also with the social consequences of a world that sees them as monstrous, untrustworthy, or expendable, and within this settlement, power rests firmly in the hands of Set, a ghoul whose cunning, charisma, and ruthlessness ensured he would dominate Necropolis's political landscape, ruling through fear and respect alike, establishing laws, rationing resources, and enforcing the social order that would allow his people to survive, where other isolated ghouls perished, and Set's leadership becomes central to the Vault Dweller's interaction with Necropolis, for he serves both as an ally in maintaining order and a moral challenge, embodying the pragmatic, often harsh decisions ghouls must make to endure in a world that offers them little safety. The city itself, built upon the skeleton of a pre-war human town, is a labyrinth of irradiated ruins, broken infrastructure, and makeshift dwellings, with ghoul families clustering together for protection, scavenging what they can from the coal, surrounding wasteland, while avoiding roaming supermutants, raiders, and feral ghouls, whose presence underscores the constant danger that accompanies life in Necropolis. Because even within a city of intelligent ghouls, the threat of feralization, starvation, or disease is ever present, and the fragile social structures of the settlement must continually adapt to these hazards, balancing survival, law, and social cohesion in a delicate equilibrium. The Vault Dweller's arrival triggers a series of pivotal events, as he is tasked with repairing the city's water supply, which is in disrepair due to broken pumps and contaminated wells, and this quest demonstrates both the practical and symbolic challenges faced by ghoul communities. For water is life, and without it, the ghouls' carefully maintained society risks collapse, making the player's decisions directly impactful, while also highlighting the interdependence of humans and ghouls in the wasteland. Because though Necropolis is isolated, it cannot function entirely without occasional outside assistance, a dynamic that emphasizes both the vulnerability and ingenuity of ghoul settlements. Inside Necropolis, individual ghouls reveal the richness and diversity of their society, from those loyal to Set and committed to the strict social hierarchy, to those more sympathetic to outsiders, including traders, artisans, and those who hope for a better future beyond isolation. And these interactions paint a picture of a community that is neither wholly evil nor wholly virtuous, but complex, resilient, and human in its own way, and this complexity is reinforced by the city's history, as the descendants of Vault 12's survivors have lived there for decades, even centuries, learning to manage the fallout, maintain rudimentary agriculture, and enforce laws while grappling with the ever-present danger of feralization, a process that constantly reminds every ghoul of their mortality and the fragility of their society, creating a tension between long-term planning and short-term survival that defines Necropolis's existence. Furthermore, Necropolis's role in Fallout 1 goes beyond mere setting, as it introduces players to the ethical and moral considerations of interacting with ghouls, forcing the Vault Dweller to navigate questions of trust, loyalty, and the consequences of human prejudice, because many humans in the wasteland view Necropolis's residents as threats to be eliminated, while others recognize their intelligence, culture, and right to exist, and this duality reflects the larger themes of Fallout, where survival and morality are rarely straightforward, and every choice carries weight. Throughout the game, encounters with Necropolis's residents illustrate how ghouls maintain family units, trade networks, and defensive strategies to protect themselves from external threats, all while struggling with the internal pressures of their condition. And these portrayals make it clear that Necropolis is not simply a dungeon or a quest hub, but a living society, a microcosm of the challenges facing ghouls across the wasteland, from resource scarcity and infrastructure decay to social hierarchy and the omnipresent threat of feralization. And in this way, Necropolis provides a foundation for understanding all subsequent ghoul communities in Fallout, serving as both an origin story and a lens through which players can examine the broader implications of life as a ghoul, its ruins standing as a testament to adaptation, resilience, and the tragic beauty of a society born from humanity's darkest hour. Harold is one of the most enduring and tragic figures in Fallout lore, a ghoul whose life spans multiple games, and whose story reflects both the resilience and the sorrow of ghoul existence, for he was originally a human before the Great War, living an ordinary life that would be forever altered by exposure to the forced evolutionary virus at the Mariposa military base, an event that caused him to transform into a ghoul while simultaneously imbuing him with the ability to live for centuries, an extraordinary longevity that has allowed him to witness the rise and fall of human civilizations, the devastation of nuclear war, and the slow decay of the wasteland into a dangerous, irradiated environment where survival is never guaranteed. Yet his transformation was not accompanied by immediate clarity or purpose, leaving him to navigate the post-war world as both a living relic of the past and a being fundamentally changed, with necrotic skin, diminished physical appearance, and the psychological burden of immortality. And what makes Harold unique among ghouls is that, despite his transformation, he retains his intelligence, personality, and sense of identity. though he is constantly haunted by the creeping threat of feralization that looms over all ghouls, a reminder that even the most stable individuals are never free from the potential to lose themselves entirely to the mutation that defines them. Throughout Fallout 1, Fallout 2, and Fallout 3, Harold's presence evolves from minor encounters to pivotal narrative moments, demonstrating the ways in which ghouls can influence the world around them. And in Fallout 1, he is found in Necropolis, living among other ghouls who respect his longevity and experience, though his role is largely observational at this point, providing a bridge between the Vault Dweller and the ghoul population, while in Fallout 2 he is encountered again as part of the broader ghoul diaspora, a reminder that the survivors of Vault 12 and other irradiated locations have spread and adapted in the decades following the initial devastation, and that Harold, more than most, embodies the continuity of ghoul history, connecting players to the pre-war world, the Great War, and the slow evolution of ghoul society over time. In Fallout 3, Harold takes on a far more prominent role as a wanderer in the capital wasteland, his story intertwined with the larger narrative through quests, environmental storytelling, and direct interactions, revealing that he has undergone additional mutations over the centuries, including a mysterious partial transformation into a tree-like form caused by prolonged exposure to FEV or radiation, in combination with his own unique biology, an unusual event, even among ghouls, that speaks to the unpredictability of their condition and the extraordinary circumstances that can shape individual lives in the post-war world, and this further solidifies Harold's place as a singular figure, a one-of-a-kind character whose experiences are emblematic of the diversity within the ghoul population, showing that while some ghouls succumb to feralization, others can adapt in extraordinary ways, surviving environmental extremes and evolving beyond even the typical traits of their species. Harold's personality is equally complex, reflecting centuries of reflection, adaptation, and interaction with humans and other ghouls, and he serves as both a source of guidance and a cautionary tale, his lengthy lifespan giving him a perspective on the recurring cycles of human conflict, mutant aggression, and wasteland survival that few others possess, and his ability to navigate these challenges while maintaining his identity illustrates the potential for ghouls to retain humanity, wisdom, and agency, even in a world that constantly tests their limits, and his melancholy presence reminds players that the life of a ghoul is never simple or safe, because to survive for centuries is to witness the relentless passage of time, the deaths of friends and family, and the collapse of every society one once knew, all while carrying the visible marks of mutation that separate them from other humans, making Harold a living embodiment of both endurance and loss. Moreover, Harold's impact on the Fallout universe extends beyond his immediate storylines, as he has become a symbol of the ghoul condition itself, a representation of what it means to live as a being caught between human and mutated forms, a witness to history, and a participant in the shaping of ghoul communities across the wasteland, from Necropolis to the capital wasteland and beyond. And in each of these locations, his presence offers insight into how ghouls interact with humans, other ghouls, and the environment, teaching players about resilience, morality, and adaptation in a world that has been irrevocably changed by nuclear devastation. And by studying Harold's life, one gains an understanding of both the personal and societal dimensions of ghoul existence, the balance between intelligence and the ever-present threat of feralization, and the ways in which a single individual can influence and embody the broader history of a species that is at once tragic, enduring, and profoundly tied to the events of the Great War and its aftermath. The settlement of Gecko in Fallout 2 represents one of the most fully realized ghoul communities outside of Necropolis, a society built around survival, cooperation, and the remnants of pre-war technology, illustrating the ways in which ghouls adapted to the challenges of the wasteland while maintaining their own distinct culture. And Gecko's history is intimately tied to the irradiated power plant that dominates its landscape, a structure that serves both as a source of energy and a constant threat due to radiation leaks and the instability inherent in post-war technology. And while humans would have struggled to maintain such a facility under similar conditions, the ghouls of Gecko use their unique resilience to radiation to their advantage, inhabiting areas that would be fatal to ordinary humans, scavenging materials, and keeping the plant operational despite its dilapidated state, a testament to their ingenuity and adaptability, which allows them to thrive in an environment that is simultaneously toxic, dangerous, and isolated from the wider settlements of the wasteland. Leadership in Gecko is decentralized in the traditional sense, but the influence of Harold is felt indirectly, as his experience and guidance over the centuries helped inspire settlements like this to form, demonstrating that ghouls can create functional societies when given the space and security to do so. And within Gecko, residents have developed a complex social structure, balancing cooperation with competition and emphasizing mutual defense against both feral ghouls and human raiders, who often view the settlement as either a target or an aberration. For despite the intelligence and civility of Gecko's population, they are still ghouls in a world that has largely rejected them, making their existence both precarious and remarkable. The power plant itself is the lifeblood of the community, as it provides the electricity necessary for basic needs, lights, and rudimentary technology. But it also represents the inherent dangers of living in a ghoul settlement, because frequent radiation leaks, mechanical failures, and contamination threaten the inhabitants constantly, forcing them to develop safety protocols, build protective barriers, and train specialists to maintain equipment, while also ensuring that the community remains functional despite occasional environmental catastrophes. And these challenges shape the culture and identity of the ghouls, who learn resilience, technical skill, and cooperation as essential elements of survival, making the settlement a microcosm of ghoul ingenuity and adaptability in the irradiated wasteland. Conflicts with external powers are also central to Gecko's story, as the new California Republic, NCR, has ambitions to expand its influence into the region, seeking to exploit the town's resources, particularly the power plant, for human benefit, but the ghouls' occupancy and resistance create a constant tension, highlighting the broader theme of human-ghoul relations in Fallout, where coexistence is possible, but fragile, and where misunderstandings, fear, and prejudice can lead to conflict even when both parties have common goals. And this tension is amplified by the ghouls' defensive strategies, their knowledge of the plant, and their ability to withstand environmental hazards that would deter human attackers, making them formidable opponents despite their population size. Individual residents of Gecko, such as Harold's followers or other notable ghouls, demonstrate the diversity of ghoul experiences, from those who embrace their condition and see themselves as part of a long-lived, enduring culture, to those who fear the encroaching threat of feralization and struggle with the isolation and prejudice that comes from being ghoul in a hostile world, and their stories illuminate the social and psychological dimensions of ghoul communities, emphasizing that survival is not simply about enduring radiation or building infrastructure, but also about maintaining cohesion, identity, and purpose over centuries, in a world that constantly reminds them of their fragility and difference. The town's geography and layout also reflect ghoul priorities, with the power plant at its center, residential and communal areas clustered around it, and defensive measures extending outward toward the surrounding wasteland, illustrating an emphasis on both safety and functionality. While scavenging parties are regularly sent to collect resources, salvage pre-war technology, and defend the settlement from both human raiders and feral ghouls, reinforcing the notion that Gecko is a community built through constant effort and vigilance, where survival depends on the active participation of all residents, and the shared experience of living in a dangerous, irradiated environment fosters bonds that define their culture and sense of identity. Gecko also highlights the economic and cultural ingenuity of ghouls, as the community engages in trade with nearby settlements, when possible, barters scavenged goods, and maintains rudimentary governance structures that allow disputes to be resolved without resorting to violence, reflecting an evolution beyond mere survival into the formation of a functional society that can endure over decades. And in the broader narrative of Fallout, Gecko serves as a model for how ghoul communities can flourish under the right conditions, balancing environmental adaptation, social cohesion, and technical skill, while also revealing the ever-present dangers inherent to their mutation, the threat of feralization, and the hostility of a human-dominated world that frequently views them as outsiders. The story of Gecko emphasizes the broader resilience and ingenuity of ghouls, showing that while many communities fail or collapse under environmental and social pressures, those that persist, like Necropolis, Underworld, and Gecko, are capable of creating lasting societies, asserting cultural identity, and surviving in ways that humans alone cannot. And this provides a critical perspective on the ghoul experience, illustrating both the tragedy and the triumph of these post-war survivors, who, despite the physical and social challenges imposed by their mutation, continue to shape the wasteland in subtle but meaningful ways, leaving behind a legacy that is simultaneously fragile, enduring, and profoundly human in its insistence on life and survival against overwhelming odds. The capital wasteland in Fallout 3 presents one of the most detailed and complex portrayals of ghoul society in the series, highlighting both the diversity of their experiences and the challenges they face living alongside humans and other mutated beings. As the region surrounding Washington, D.C. became a focal point for radiation exposure, feral outbreaks, and the survival of intelligent ghouls in a landscape marked by destruction and scarcity. And in this environment, several notable ghoul communities emerge, each reflecting different aspects of their culture, resilience, and relationship with humans. One of the most prominent settlements is Underworld, a fully realized underground ghoul city located beneath the Museum of History, where intelligent ghouls have carved out a home free from the fear of human persecution, maintaining a thriving community with trade, governance, and cultural activities, while avoiding the surface dangers of feral ghouls, raiders, and mutant incursions. And Underworld's leadership structure, social norms, and protective infrastructure illustrate the capacity of ghouls to organize sophisticated societies despite centuries of isolation and adversity, creating a microcosm of what ghoul civilization could achieve when left relatively unmolested by humans. The residents of Underworld, such as Carol, Winthrop, and Greta, demonstrate a wide spectrum of ghoul personalities, from pragmatic leaders to cautious merchants, highlighting the complexity and diversity of their population. And the settlement functions as both a sanctuary and a hub of ghoul history, preserving knowledge, artifacts, and oral traditions from before and after the Great War, while also serving as a base from which ghouls can interact with the wider wasteland, whether through trade, diplomacy, or defense, showcasing the adaptability and ingenuity that have allowed intelligent ghouls to endure for centuries in a hostile world. The city's design reflects the practical concerns of ghoul life, with fortified entrances, controlled water access, and secure living quarters to protect against external threats such as raiders or feral ghouls, while internal social structures ensure that residents contribute to the community's survival, whether through scavenging, maintenance, or governance. And this combination of environmental adaptation, social cohesion, and technological ingenuity underscores the sophistication of ghoul society when compared to the scattered and often lawless human settlements above ground, highlighting that survival in the wasteland requires not only physical resilience, but also intelligence, cooperation, and foresight. Another critical element of the capital wasteland is the presence of feral ghouls on the surface, which act as both a natural hazard and a narrative reminder of the fragility of ghoul life, as many formerly intelligent individuals succumb to the degeneration of their minds over centuries, leaving behind packs of mindless aggressors that threaten both humans and other ghouls alike. And this constant danger shapes the social and psychological framework of ghoul communities, fostering vigilance, defensive measures, and a culture of awareness around the risks of feralization, illustrating that life in the capital wasteland is a perpetual negotiation between stability and chaos. Notable quests in Fallout 3 further highlight the dynamics between ghouls and humans, as seen in Tenpenny Tower, where Roy Phillips, a charismatic ghoul leader, seeks to challenge human prejudice and assert ghoul rights, even going so far as to employ feral ghouls as a tactical force to secure his vision, demonstrating the tension between justice and survival, as well as the ethical complexities faced by ghouls attempting to assert agency in a world that has systematically marginalized them. And his story underscores the broader theme that ghouls are not simply victims of circumstance, but active participants in shaping their fate, even when constrained by centuries of persecution and physical mutation. Additionally, the capital wasteland features smaller communities, such as the few ghouls living in Megaton or roaming the streets near the ruins of D.C., where interactions with humans range from cautious coexistence to open hostility, reflecting a spectrum of relationships across the region. And the player encounters numerous individual ghouls whose personalities, experiences, and histories add depth to the narrative, showing that ghouls are not a monolithic group, but a population defined by individual choice, resilience, and adaptation. Fallout 3 also introduces the concept of radiation-dependent health and the effects of the environment on ghouls, as many intelligent ghouls thrive in irradiated zones, while humans cannot, turning the dangerous landscape into both a sanctuary and a challenge, reinforcing the idea that ghouls have adapted biologically and socially to survive, where humans often fail, and this environmental specialization has allowed them to carve out niches in areas abandoned or avoided by humans. From irradiated subways and metro tunnels, to ruined government buildings and decayed monuments, turning remnants of the old world into functioning habitats. The diversity of ghoul culture in the capital wasteland is further illustrated by characters like Gob, who represents the intellectual and cautious side of ghoul society, emphasizing education, history, and preservation, and by others, such as Tenpenny Tower ghouls, who take a more assertive stance in seeking equality or revenge against human oppressors, showing that even within a single geographic region, ghoul communities develop divergent strategies and cultural norms based on local conditions, leadership, and individual personality. Ultimately, the portrayal of ghouls in the capital wasteland demonstrates the complexity of their existence. They are survivors, historians, warriors, and victims all at once. A population shaped by centuries of environmental stress, social exclusion, and the biological consequences of radiation, and their enduring presence throughout Fallout 3 emphasizes that ghouls are not merely adversaries or plot devices, but fully realized members of the post-war ecosystem, whose stories, struggles, and triumphs provide insight into both the challenges of the wasteland and the resilience of life itself in the face of catastrophe, making the capital wasteland one of the most compelling stages for exploring the multifaceted nature of ghoul existence. In the Mojave wasteland, Fallout New Vegas presents a wide range of ghoul settlements, illustrating the adaptability and resilience of these post-war survivors, as well as the social dynamics that emerge when intelligent ghouls are forced to coexist with humans, supermutants, and other mutated creatures in a harsh, irradiated environment. And one of the most prominent ghoul locations is the town of Goodsprings, where a small number of ghouls live alongside humans, demonstrating that coexistence is possible under the right circumstances, though they often face prejudice, harassment, and social exclusion, emphasizing the persistent theme in Fallout lore that ghouls are caught between two worlds, physically altered by radiation, yet intellectually and emotionally connected to humanity, and their struggle to navigate this divide shapes their communities and interactions throughout the Mojave. The town of New Vegas itself, under the control of Mr. House, Caesar's Legion, or the NCR, depending on the player's choices, features ghouls in smaller populations, some employed as laborers or residents of settlements on the outskirts of civilization, illustrating the complex social hierarchies that emerge in a world where intelligence and survival skills are as critical as physical ability, and the player encounters both friendly and hostile ghouls, ranging from vendors and quest givers to feralized aggressors, reflecting the diversity of outcomes for ghouls in this region, and reinforcing the notion that longevity does not guarantee stability or safety. One of the most significant ghoul settlements in the Mojave is the Repcon test site, where a cult-like group of ghouls led by Jason Bright, a glowing ghoul, has formed a society centered around religious devotion to the stars and the dream of returning to space. And this settlement demonstrates a unique cultural adaptation, blending the biological consequences of radiation exposure with psychological and spiritual frameworks that give meaning to their long lives, creating a community where faith, hope, and social cohesion allow ghouls to find purpose in an otherwise hostile wasteland. And the player's interactions with Repcon reveal both the ingenuity and the fragility of ghoul society, as their survival depends on both environmental control and mutual trust, and any disruption, such as a conflict with external forces or internal instability, threatens the delicate balance they have achieved. Another important settlement is the town of Prim, where ghouls appear as residents or transient laborers, showing that even outside fully ghoul-dominated communities, intelligent ghouls can integrate into broader society, participating in trade, defense, and daily life, while still navigating the persistent challenges of prejudice and the threat of feralization. And this integration highlights the ways in which ghouls adapt culturally and socially to maximize survival while retaining their identity. The Mojave also emphasizes the contrast between feral and intelligent ghouls, as the wasteland is populated with roaming feral packs in irradiated zones, such as around the Mojave outpost, and in the mountainous regions, whose aggressive behavior and heightened radiation levels create hazards that reinforce the necessity for intelligent ghouls to form protected settlements and avoid exposure to open spaces whenever possible. And the constant tension between survival, mutation, and social cohesion forms a central narrative element in New Vegas, demonstrating how environmental pressures shape culture, behavior, and the evolution of ghoul communities over centuries. New Vegas also explores the political dynamics of ghoul communities, as the NCR and Caesar's Legion both have policies that affect ghoul populations differently, with the NCR generally seeking to assimilate or protect ghouls in its territory, while Caesar's Legion views them as subhuman and often hostile, creating additional challenges for settlements, attempting to navigate the complex web of alliances, trade, and defense necessary for survival. And the choices the player makes in interacting with these groups can significantly affect the fate of ghoul populations, emphasizing the moral and strategic complexity inherent in Fallout storytelling. Individual ghoul characters in New Vegas, such as Raul Tejada, a former ghoul caravaner turned companion, provide personal narratives that highlight resilience, adaptation, and the emotional dimensions of centuries-long life, offering insight into how ghouls maintain identity, memory, and purpose despite their mutation, and illustrating the potential for mentorship, friendship, and loyalty within a species often defined by its outsider status, while also providing tangible examples of how ghoul, skills, knowledge, and experience shape the survival strategies of Mojave communities. Culturally, ghouls in New Vegas display unique adaptations, from scavenging and trade skills to technological repair and engineering, reflecting the necessity of maintaining and utilizing pre-war knowledge to survive in irradiated environments. And their ingenuity allows small populations to thrive in locations humans might avoid, emphasizing that survival is not solely about physical endurance, but also about cognitive resourcefulness, social cohesion, and the ability to manipulate environmental hazards to their advantage, which is evident in how communities like Repcon, Goodsprings, and Prim operate. Ultimately, Fallout New Vegas portrays Mojave ghouls as a complex, adaptive, and socially dynamic population, capable of maintaining settlements, traditions, and cultural identities, while navigating a world hostile both environmentally and socially, and the game highlights that their longevity, resistance to radiation, and collective ingenuity make them essential components of the wasteland's ecosystem, demonstrating that ghouls are not merely tragic figures or feral threats, but active participants in shaping post-war society, and through their settlements, characters, and interactions, the Mojave illustrates the broad spectrum of ghoul experiences, from isolated survival to integration, spiritual devotion, and political engagement, solidifying their role as both survivors and storytellers in the ever-evolving narrative of the Fallout universe. Fallout 4 offers perhaps the most detailed exploration of ghoul evolution in the series, portraying not only their biology and social structures, but also the ways in which centuries of survival, environmental adaptation, and human interaction have shaped their culture, identity, and relationships in the Commonwealth. And unlike previous entries, Fallout 4 emphasizes the dynamic tension between intelligent ghouls, feral populations, and human society, highlighting both continuity and change from earlier settings, as centuries of radiation exposure and post-war adaptation have resulted in variations in physiology, intelligence, and social behavior, creating a spectrum of ghoul experience that ranges from fully functional and articulate citizens to mindless, irradiated feral monsters, each representing a distinct response to the stresses of prolonged mutation, scarcity, and environmental hazard. The Commonwealth is home to several prominent ghoul communities, most notably Goodneighbor, an enclave led by Hancock, a charismatic ghoul who embodies both leadership and resilience, having converted the settlement into a safe haven for outcasts of all kinds, including humans, ghouls, and other marginalized individuals. And Goodneighbor demonstrates how ghoul society can thrive when it combines autonomy, cooperative governance, and mutual respect, offering sanctuary, trade, and cultural cohesion, while maintaining vigilance against feral threats and human antagonists. And this settlement becomes a central hub for exploring the social, political, and moral dimensions of ghoul life in the game, highlighting how evolved social structures can mitigate the threats posed by both biology and prejudice. In addition to Goodneighbor, the Commonwealth features other ghoul communities, such as the partially irradiated populations in the ruins of Boston and Quincy, where intelligent ghouls form small networks of survivors, scavenging pre-war technology, maintaining water and food supplies, and negotiating with human settlements, or roaming factions like the Minutemen or the Brotherhood of Steel, demonstrating the adaptability of ghouls in integrating skills, knowledge, and leadership to ensure survival despite systemic dangers, while also negotiating a place in a world that has never fully accepted them. Fallout 4 also explores the ongoing threat of feralization, a defining factor in ghoul evolution, as centuries-long lifespans carry the risk that mental faculties will degrade over time, creating the ever-present possibility that even the most stable ghouls may eventually transform into feral predators, and this biological reality drives social practices within communities, emphasizing vigilance, medical knowledge, environmental control, and social cohesion, all aimed at delaying or mitigating feral outcomes. And it demonstrates that evolution for ghouls is not merely physical, but also cultural, as centuries of experience have necessitated the development of strategies, governance, and norms to cope with the biological challenges inherent in their existence. Further evolution is evident in the emergence of glowing ones, rare ghouls who emit intense radiation due to prolonged exposure and mutation, representing both the extremes of adaptation and the dangers of unchecked environmental exposure, and their existence illustrates the unpredictable trajectories of ghoul physiology over centuries, as well as the potential for certain individuals to acquire abilities that exceed typical ghoul parameters, reinforcing the theme that ghoul evolution is a spectrum shaped by genetics, environment, and historical circumstance, and that these variations have profound effects on social dynamics, threat assessment, and survival strategies within and beyond ghoul communities. Individual ghoul characters in Fallout 4, such as Hancock, Travis Miles, and Daisy, provide narrative depth to the exploration of evolution, showing how centuries of living with radiation have shaped their personalities, decision-making, and interactions with humans, and highlighting that evolved ghouls retain intelligence, agency, and morality, offering counterpoints to feralized populations while demonstrating resilience, adaptability, and the ability to maintain personal and collective identity over extended timeframes. Technological and cultural adaptation also play a role in evolution, as ghouls repurpose pre-war technology, secure clean water, establish trade networks, and create governance structures that enhance communal survival, illustrating that evolution is not limited to biology, but extends to social and environmental problem-solving, cultural cohesion, and leadership, all necessary components for sustaining life in the irradiated wasteland. And these adaptations highlight the ingenuity and resourcefulness that define ghoul communities, showing that intelligence and social organization are as critical to survival as radiation resistance. Fallout 4 further emphasizes the psychological and societal dimensions of ghoul evolution, exploring the consequences of centuries of marginalization, loss, and survival under constant threat, as residents of settlements like Goodneighbor must balance self-preservation with moral obligations to humans, other ghouls, and the wider ecosystem, navigating the complexities of trust, alliances, and inter-community relations, and demonstrating that the evolutionary success of ghouls depends as much on cultural intelligence and ethical decision-making as on biological resilience, with leaders like Hancock embodying the potential for evolved ghouls to cultivate societies capable of enduring across generations, maintaining identity and culture in the face of environmental and social adversity. Ultimately, Fallout 4 portrays ghoul evolution as a multifaceted process, encompassing biology, culture, psychology, and social organization, showing that survival over centuries requires adaptation in every dimension of life, from physiology and resistance to radiation, to governance, trade, and defense, while negotiating the constant threat of feralization and human prejudice, and through communities, individual characters, and interactions with the player, the game demonstrates that ghouls are not merely tragic figures or relics of the Great War, but dynamic participants in post-war society, whose evolution over centuries has created a complex, adaptable, and resilient population capable of influencing the fate of the Commonwealth and leaving a lasting mark on the wasteland's history. Fallout 76, set in the Appalachian wasteland of West Virginia, presents a unique and expansive perspective on ghoul life, as the game explores both the immediate aftermath of the Great War and the centuries-long consequences of radiation exposure in a region isolated from the major eastern settlements of previous games, and the ghouls in this setting serve as living testaments to survival, adaptation, and the complex social dynamics that emerge when mutation meets prolonged environmental stress. With Appalachia's unique flora, fauna, and pre-war industrial infrastructure shaping the development of ghoul communities in ways distinct from Necropolis, the capital wasteland, or the Mojave, the game introduces intelligent and feral ghouls across the wasteland, with many of the former being survivors of pre-war nuclear fallout who have either resisted full feralization or emerged from vaults and bunkers decades after the bombs fell, forming scattered communities, sometimes hidden in abandoned towns, repurposed bunkers, or within the protective embrace of radioactive zones, too dangerous for humans, illustrating how Appalachia's geography and climate, with its mountains, rivers, and forests, provides both refuge and challenge, offering shelter while imposing isolation that has forced ghouls to develop unique survival strategies, social norms, and resource-gathering practices, unlike those seen elsewhere in the Fallout universe. Among the most significant intelligent ghoul settlements is Foundation, a town built by human survivors who coexist with ghouls and other mutants, where ghoul characters, such as the elderly and sagacious residents, contribute to governance, trade, and defense, illustrating the integration of ghouls into human-centric settlements and highlighting the ongoing themes of trust, cooperation, and prejudice that have long defined Fallout's depiction of post-war society, as humans in Appalachia must navigate relationships with ghouls, while acknowledging both their longevity and their resilience to radiation, creating nuanced social hierarchies that balance pragmatism, morality, and survival needs. Fallout 76 also emphasizes the feral ghoul threat, as wandering packs of highly irradiated and aggressive ghouls dominate abandoned industrial zones, old coal mines, and nuclear test sites, demonstrating the consequences of mutation and neglect, and presenting a stark contrast to intelligent communities, revealing the spectrum of ghoul evolution in Appalachia, from highly functional, cooperative survivors to dangerous, uncontrollable predators, and underscoring the constant tension that defines ghoul life, as individuals and settlements must manage internal safety while fending off external threats. The Appalachia setting also introduces narrative and environmental depth, with ghouls serving as living historical records of pre-war society, vault experiments, and early post-war adaptation, as many possess centuries of memory, accumulated knowledge, and tactical experience that can be observed in dialogue, quest lines, and environmental storytelling, and these long-lived legends, whether solitary wanderers or members of semi-structured communities, reveal the psychological and cultural dimensions of longevity, showing that extended life brings not only survival advantages, but also the burden of witnessing generational loss, societal collapse, and the long-term consequences of human conflict and environmental devastation. Individual characters, such as residents of Charleston or Morgantown, and figures who interact with Vault 76 survivors, demonstrate the nuanced social integration of ghouls in Appalachia, balancing cautious diplomacy, trade, and alliances with humans, while sometimes seeking autonomy and self-preservation in areas too irradiated or dangerous for ordinary humans, reflecting the enduring theme of Fallout that ghouls, despite their mutations, retain intelligence, agency, and a capacity for community, and that their longevity allows them to act as cultural anchors, historians, and mediators across generations of post-war society. The environmental storytelling of Fallout 76 further highlights the adaptive ingenuity of ghouls, showing how they have repurposed pre-war infrastructure, scavenged industrial materials, and utilized radiation-heavy zones for protection against human and mutant threats, demonstrating that survival in Appalachia requires both biological resilience and cultural adaptation, and reinforcing the idea that ghoul evolution is not merely a function of mutation, but also of social strategy, environmental management, and technological improvisation, and that these factors together create communities capable of sustaining life in a harsh, irradiated landscape over decades and even centuries. Appalachia's lore also emphasizes the moral and ethical dimensions of interacting with ghouls, as players encounter quests and narratives where ghoul rights, autonomy, and social integration are tested, whether through disputes over land, resources, or human expansion, highlighting the continued tension between survival, pragmatism, and ethical responsibility, and demonstrating that ghouls are not simply obstacles or enemies, but sentient, historically informed actors whose presence challenges players to consider the broader implications of post-war governance, societal reconstruction, and interspecies cooperation. Fallout 76's depiction of ghouls also expands upon the consequences of FEV, radiation, and environmental adaptation, showing that longevity comes with both physiological and psychological costs, from the slow deterioration of cognitive function in some cases to social isolation in others. And yet it also grants advantages, such as accumulated knowledge, enhanced radiation tolerance, and the ability to guide younger generations or maintain cultural continuity, which has shaped Appalachia's human and mutant interactions over time, creating a layered and intricate social fabric that players can explore through dialogue, environmental cues, and community narratives. Ultimately, the ghouls of Fallout 76 exemplify both continuity and innovation within the series, reflecting themes of survival, adaptation, prejudice, and longevity, while demonstrating the unique characteristics of the Appalachian wasteland, where geography, radiation, and human settlement patterns have created a complex ecosystem in which ghouls act as historians, protectors, traders, and survivors, and through their settlements, interactions, and long-lived legends, they reveal the resilience, ingenuity, and cultural depth that have allowed them to endure across centuries, shaping the narrative, social, and ecological landscape of Appalachia in ways that resonate throughout the broader Fallout universe, ensuring that ghouls remain central to understanding the past, present, and future of post-war society. Among the many forms of ghoul mutation in the Fallout universe, few are as dramatic or as feared as the glowing ones. Individuals whose bodies emit visible radiation, often accompanied by enhanced physical abilities, accelerated healing, and the capacity to irradiate others. And while they represent an extreme evolutionary outcome of prolonged exposure to the post-war environment, they are also a rare and unpredictable manifestation of the underlying biology of ghouls, illustrating the interplay between mutation, environmental adaptation, and radiation-induced transformation over centuries, and their existence highlights both the potential and the danger inherent in ghoul physiology, as the very mutation that grants them remarkable abilities also isolates them from other ghouls and humans alike, creating a liminal existence between predator, protector, and outcast. And within the lore of Fallout, glowing ones serve as a stark reminder that mutation is not uniform, that radiation does not simply damage or weaken, but can also reshape life in ways that defy simple categorization, producing beings whose abilities and behavior are as much a product of circumstance and environmental stress as of their original human biology. The appearance of glowing ones is often tied to locations of intense radiation, such as irradiated zones near reactors, collapsed military facilities, and contaminated urban ruins, suggesting that chronic exposure accelerates or amplifies the transformation beyond ordinary ghoul physiology. And while some speculate that the phenomenon might be linked to genetic predisposition, previous infection with FEV, or exposure to concentrated nuclear material, the canon remains deliberately ambiguous, reflecting the uncertainty of mutation in a world where radiation interacts with life in unpredictable ways, and reinforcing the theme that even among ghouls, the boundaries between intelligence, sanity, and monstrosity are tenuous, and that evolutionary pathways in the post-apocalyptic world are as much a product of environmental randomness as of conscious adaptation. Glowing ones also play significant narrative and mechanical roles across multiple Fallout games, serving as formidable combatants whose aggression, health regeneration, and irradiative abilities challenge both players and NPCs, yet their depiction also underscores the tragic side of mutation, as these individuals often lose their higher cognitive functions over time, becoming increasingly feral and isolated, and illustrating the dual nature of radiation's impact as it confers power while simultaneously threatening identity, social integration, and long-term survival. And this tension is central to their lore, showing that in Fallout, mutation is never an unqualified blessing, but a double-edged sword that carries both opportunity and risk. In Fallout 3, the capital wasteland features numerous glowing ones roaming irradiated zones, often leading packs of feral ghouls, demonstrating their role as apex predators within the ghoul population, while in Fallout 4, the Commonwealth's glowing ones are similarly scattered across irradiated sites, yet some retain enough intelligence to form rudimentary social connections, communicate, or even interact cautiously with humans, highlighting the spectrum of behavioral outcomes and the influence of environment, exposure level, and possibly age or genetic factors on the trajectory of mutation, and reinforcing the notion that the glowing ones are not a static category, but a dynamic and variable result of post-war radiation exposure. The biological mechanics of glowing ones are also noteworthy, as their ability to emit radiation provides both a defensive and offensive advantage, allowing them to deter attackers, heal nearby feral ghouls, or create environmental hazards that reshape encounters, and this adaptation illustrates a form of evolutionary specialization, in which extreme mutation provides both survival, benefits, and social consequences, as other ghouls often fear, revere, or avoid these individuals due to their power, unpredictability, and potential to become uncontrollable, creating a complex social dynamic within ghoul communities where glowing ones are both feared and strategically valuable, and their rarity ensures that encounters are memorable, dangerous, and narratively significant. Culturally, glowing ones have been interpreted in multiple ways within the Fallout universe, sometimes viewed as omens, leaders, or embodiments of radiation's transformative power, while other ghouls see them as cautionary examples of the ultimate cost of prolonged mutation, illustrating that even within ghoul society, there is awareness of the delicate balance between adaptation, evolution, and feralization, and that mutation can enhance, isolate, or ultimately destroy the individual depending on circumstances, exposure, and biological predisposition. The presence of glowing ones also deepens the lore surrounding ghoul evolution, as it demonstrates that the outcomes of radiation exposure are neither linear nor predictable, and that the ghoul condition encompasses a broad range of possibilities, from intelligent, community-focused survivors to extreme mutants who embody both power and tragedy, and this variability is central to Fallout's depiction of post-apocalyptic biology, showing that survival is contingent not only on intelligence and social cooperation, but also on the interplay between environment, mutation, and chance, and that the line between adaptation and catastrophe is thin, producing beings who are both extraordinary and vulnerable in ways that mirror the broader themes of the wasteland. Ultimately, glowing ones represent the apex of radiation-induced mutation in ghouls, embodying the extremes of survival, power, and the consequences of exposure, and their lore emphasizes that ghoul evolution is a spectrum defined by biology, environment, culture, and circumstance, illustrating both the possibilities and the perils inherent in life after the Great War, and serving as a compelling narrative and mechanical tool to explore the complex interplay between mutation, identity, social structure, and survival in a world where radiation is both a curse and a transformative force. In the Fallout universe, few aspects of post-war life are as fascinating as the long-lived individuals who have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, enduring centuries of hardship, radiation, and societal collapse. And among these legends, ghouls naturally occupy a prominent position, their extended lifespans allowing them to accumulate knowledge, experience, and influence far beyond the typical human. And yet they are not the only examples of longevity. Figures like Harold, Jason Bright, and various vault dwellers who survived decades in isolation exemplify how prolonged life shapes not only biology, but culture, politics, and personal identity, and the study of these individuals reveals the multifaceted consequences of survival in the irradiated wasteland, as they bear witness to multiple generations of conflict, technological change, and societal transformation, often acting as repositories of history in a world where written records are scarce and memory is fragile. And these long-lived legends serve as bridges between eras, connecting pre-war knowledge to post-war reality, guiding younger survivors, and shaping the mythos of the wasteland through both action and storytelling. Harold, perhaps the most iconic of these figures, embodies the tragic and heroic potential of long-lived life. Having endured the FEV exposure at Mariposa, survived centuries of fertilization threats, and witnessed the collapse of human civilization, yet through his travels and interactions across the capital wasteland and beyond, he accumulates wisdom, empathy, and strategic understanding of the wasteland's shifting powers, influencing ghoul communities, assisting vault dwellers, and serving as a living link between multiple Fallout games. And his partial transformation into a tree-like form further exemplifies the unpredictable biological consequences of extreme longevity combined with radiation, symbolizing both adaptation and the alienation that comes from outliving friends, family, and ordinary human society. Jason Bright and the RepCon test site followers present another aspect of long-lived legend, as the glowing ghoul cultivates a community centered on celestial worship and the dream of space travel, demonstrating that prolonged life enables the creation of enduring social structures, philosophical systems, and cultural identities. And while their society may seem eccentric or cult-like to outsiders, it reflects a deeply human drive for purpose, continuity, and legacy, highlighting that long-lived legends often intertwine personal ambition with collective influence, shaping the trajectory of entire settlements and inspiring generations of followers even as the surrounding world decays. Necropolis itself, populated by the descendants of Vault 12 survivors, illustrates how long-lived ghouls serve as pillars of history, governance, and social memory, as elders carry knowledge of pre-war life, survival strategies, and prior political struggles, guiding younger ghouls in a world where every resource is scarce and every decision can be fatal, and their existence underscores the dual-edged nature of longevity. While extended life allows for mastery, cultural continuity, and leadership, it also brings isolation, grief, and the psychological burden of watching centuries pass while allies, friends, and often entire communities vanish due to violence, disease, or feralization, a theme echoed in Fallout 3's Underworld, where ghoul elders maintain traditions, trade knowledge, and safeguard history, balancing the preservation of culture with the day-to-day demands of survival in an irradiated city beneath human ruins. Long-lived human characters, though rarer, also contribute to this theme, such as those who survived decades in vaults or under unique environmental conditions, and their narratives often parallel ghoul experiences, showing that longevity amplifies the consequences of moral decisions, leadership choices, and personal resilience, and allows these figures to become almost mythic within their regions, with stories of their deeds growing larger with every retelling, creating legends whose influence extends far beyond their immediate actions, and who become symbols of hope, fear, or inspiration, depending on perspective. The Mojave wasteland further explores long-lived legends through figures like Raul Tejada, a ghoul caravaner who has survived centuries of travel, conflict, and exposure to radiation while maintaining his intelligence, moral compass, and professional skills. And through his story, players witness the interplay between personal history and broader societal dynamics, as Raul carries memory, experience, and ethical perspective across decades, impacting communities, guiding travelers, and embodying the resilience and adaptability necessary to endure the post-apocalyptic world, showing that legends are not merely old, they are active participants shaping the wasteland through their choices, relationships, and accumulated wisdom. Even feral ghouls, when examined through the lens of longevity, tell stories of survival and mutation, as individuals who resist feralization for decades achieve milestones of endurance that mark them as remarkable, and those who succumb become cautionary examples, illustrating the fragility of life under extreme environmental pressure and reinforcing the notion that longevity is both a blessing and a burden, offering extended influence and experience, while exposing the individual to prolonged danger, societal change, and the psychological weight of isolation, grief, and repeated loss. Culturally, long-lived legends, whether ghouls or humans, serve as repositories of myth, oral history, and tactical knowledge, guiding younger generations, shaping settlements, and influencing political decisions, from Necropolis and Underworld to Goodneighbor and Repcon, and their presence underscores a recurring theme in Fallout. Survival is not merely about living day to day, but about carrying the accumulated knowledge of centuries, mediating conflicts, preserving culture, and imparting lessons that can prevent repeated mistakes in a world that seems poised to repeat its tragedies. And this interplay between individual endurance and societal impact elevates these figures from mere survivors to legends whose influence endures long after they pass, becoming woven into the fabric of the wasteland's history, culture, and identity. Ultimately, the concept of long-lived legends emphasizes that in Fallout, the passage of time magnifies both the potential and the consequences of life, as those who survive for decades or centuries carry not only memories and knowledge, but also moral weight, influence over communities, and the ability to shape the trajectory of entire regions. And through ghouls like Harold, Jason Bright, Raul Tejada, and countless others, the games explore how extraordinary longevity interacts with environment, mutation, culture, and morality to create individuals who are not only witnesses to history, but active participants, shaping the wasteland, inspiring myths, and leaving legacies that endure across generations, showing that survival, experience, and legend are inseparable in the post-apocalyptic world of Fallout. The legacy of ghouls in the Fallout universe is both enduring and multifaceted, encompassing biological resilience, cultural innovation, social adaptation, and moral significance across every region and game in the series, and their presence acts as a living chronicle of the post-apocalyptic world, demonstrating how life, even when fundamentally altered by radiation and mutation, can persist, evolve, and influence human and mutant societies alike, as ghouls carry the memory of pre-war civilizations, the trauma of the Great War, and the lessons of survival through centuries, and in doing so, they serve as both witnesses and agents of history, shaping settlements, guiding generations, and preserving knowledge that might otherwise be lost in the fragmented and hazardous wasteland. And across Fallout 1 through Fallout 76, their experiences reveal recurring themes of prejudice, resilience, ingenuity, and identity, showing that the consequences of mutation extend far beyond the physical, into cultural, political, and moral domains. The oldest and most influential ghouls, such as Harold, Jason Bright, and Raul Tejada, exemplify how longevity provides opportunities for cumulative wisdom, societal influence, and myth-making, allowing these individuals to impact multiple regions, foster communities, and serve as both cautionary examples and sources of inspiration, demonstrating that survival across centuries requires not only biological resilience, but also intelligence, empathy, and adaptability, and that ghouls, unlike many other post-war survivors, occupy a liminal space between human and mutant, bridging the gaps between eras, cultures, and factions, while negotiating the psychological burdens of extended life, loss, and societal rejection. And their stories underscore the idea that enduring life carries both agency and responsibility, as choices made over decades can ripple outward to shape entire communities and historical narratives. Across various wastelands, from Necropolis and Underworld in the capital Wasteland, to Gecko in the Mojave, Goodneighbor in the Commonwealth, and Appalachia in Fallout 76, ghouls demonstrate their capacity to create functioning societies, develop governance systems, trade networks, and defense strategies, and preserve cultural continuity, showing that survival is not merely biological, but social, technological, and ethical, and that long-lived legends among ghouls act as custodians of history, mentors to younger generations, and stabilizing forces in otherwise chaotic post-war landscapes, and this enduring presence emphasizes the adaptability and ingenuity that define ghoul populations, allowing them to thrive in hostile environments while maintaining identity, traditions, and memory. The interaction between intelligent and feral ghouls further shapes their legacy, as the constant threat of feralization acts as both a biological and social constraint, challenging communities to develop safeguards, vigilance, and strategies to protect their members while managing the environmental and psychological hazards of prolonged mutation. And this duality between preservation and degeneration highlights the precarious balance inherent in long-lived life, emphasizing that every decision, every alliance, and every act of survival contributes to the larger narrative of ghoul society, and by extension, the broader story of the wasteland itself. Culturally, ghouls have left a lasting mark on human societies as well, influencing settlement practices, trade, political decisions, and ethical considerations, as factions such as the NCR, Brotherhood of Steel, and the Railroad must constantly navigate the presence, needs, and perspectives of ghoul populations, and in doing so, they reveal how the legacy of ghouls intersects with human civilization, challenging assumptions about intelligence, morality, and societal worth, and demonstrating that post-war identity is a complex negotiation shaped by biology, culture, and history, and that ghouls, as long-lived participants, offer unique insight into how survival and adaptation can redefine notions of community, power, and ethical responsibility in a fractured world. The biological evolution of ghouls, including extreme manifestations like glowing ones, further expands their legacy, illustrating the unpredictable consequences of radiation exposure and the ways in which mutation can produce both extraordinary abilities and profound isolation. And by examining these outcomes, players and lore enthusiasts gain insight into the broader ecological and evolutionary dynamics of the Fallout universe. As ghouls interact with humans, mutants, flora, and fauna in ways that continuously reshape the environment, demonstrating that survival is not static, but a dynamic process that demands ingenuity, social cohesion, and adaptive strategies across generations. Moreover, the narrative presence of ghouls in quests, dialogue, and environmental storytelling reinforces their role as both historical actors and cultural symbols, with stories of their endurance, struggle, and heroism becoming part of regional myths, influencing human attitudes, inspiring younger survivors, and preserving knowledge that informs strategy, morality, and cultural identity. And through this narrative function, ghouls act as a connective tissue linking disparate regions, games, and eras, showing that their legacy is not merely biological or social, but also literary, symbolic, and pedagogical, providing context, meaning, and continuity in a world otherwise defined by chaos, fragmentation, and decay. Fallout 76 expands this legacy further by introducing a pre-war and early post-war temporal perspective, illustrating how ghouls influence newly emerging settlements, negotiate with human factions, and navigate environmental hazards while retaining historical knowledge. And the Appalachia setting underscores the themes of adaptation, resilience, and social integration, demonstrating that even in relatively isolated regions, ghouls can exert profound influence over human and mutant societies, shaping trade, governance, and cultural continuity, while also preserving their own identity and memory across decades. Ultimately, the legacy of ghouls across Fallout is a testament to endurance, ingenuity, and the complex interplay of biology, culture, and morality in a post-apocalyptic world, showing that long-lived survivors are not only witnesses to history, but active participants who shape settlements, influence factions, preserve traditions, and navigate ethical dilemmas, and that their stories, from Harold's centuries of wandering, to the Repcon devotees, to Appalachia's intelligent residents, reveal that survival, knowledge, and identity are intertwined, and that the ghouls' persistent presence across regions, eras, and games ensures that their legacy is not only central to the narrative of the Fallout universe, but also a lens through which players and communities can explore themes of adaptation, morality, and resilience in the face of apocalypse, leaving a profound and enduring imprint on both the world they inhabit and the players who experience their stories.